welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are two retired New York City police detectives with over 20 years of law enforcement. And if you like all things true crime related from that police perspective, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, so you'll get all things DutyRon and this guy, Ed Wallace, when we go live or upload another video. And tonight we're going to talk about the indictments and the charges against Trezell and Jacqueline West. These are the two adoptive parents of Cincere and Classic, Orrin and Orson West from California City, Bakersfield. Reported December 21st, 2020 as missing, as we all found out today in such horrific fashion. They, in fact, were murdered 3 months before reporting. I want to just say special thank you to the Patreon supporters, the channel members, and everyone who engages, and welcome back from vacation, Ed Wallace. And this is, a case that we can't even get into your vacation here. We got to talk about this heinous crime that was committed against these two poor little innocent 3- and 4-year-old baby boys. Ed, what's your thoughts coming back from Bora Bora?
Well, it's a rude awakening to reality, I guess. I was in paradise and to come back and find this. But it doesn't surprise me, given my career and what we've gone through. And for me, the toughest crimes that I ever had to investigate were the truly innocent victims and the children. For the life of me, I don't understand how you can kill a child.
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. An innocent child, in this case, 2.
Right. We can never wrap our hands around that and kind of grasp it. And it's just something that it's a tough pill to swallow. We know from the get-go, I covered this case with Sergeant Bill Cannon, retired homicide detective sergeant from Manhattan North Homicide Squad. And Bill and I both said, this was before you came onto the scene here, Ed. Bill and I both said when we heard these two speaking, and they gave only one news conference, they gave one press briefing, if you will, outside of their home in California City, we said right away those kids never made it to that location. They were full of it. And
yeah, absolutely.
Fast forward to today, and here we are. I want to play for some of the folks who are outside of the country. I want to play a short clip. It's only a minute and 14, so just bear with me on this, because DutyRon and technology, I always have a little struggle with that. And we have 2 other special guests. We have criminal defense attorney Joe Murray waiting. We're going to put him on, and we have another friend of ours from Kern County joining us. So let's just play this real quick. I'm trying to. Okay, here we go. All right, folks. Let's set it back up and get it to the back. This may make you a little nauseous. I just want people to know.
Starting off this hour with an update in the case of those 2 missing boys from California City, Orrin and Orson West. The adoptive father and mother, Trezell and Jacqueline West, have both been arrested on charges of murder. According to the Superior Court website, the couple were booked on 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of willful cruelty to a child, and a misdemeanor count of filing a false report of an emergency. So how do we get to this point? Let's take a look back at the timeline of events in this case. It began back on December 21st of 2020. That's when the 2 boys were first reported missing. Then on February 4th, the reward grows for the missing boys to $120,000. On March 1st, the BPD announced they were taking over the investigation from the Cal City Police Department. In December of last year, that was the 1-year anniversary of the disappearance with no new updates from law enforcement. And then last night, we found the charges being brought.
I just want to stop it here for a second. If you look at this timeline, and this is not every ounce of investigation that happened in this case, but BPD, that's the Bakersfield Police Department, took over on March 1st, 2021. And 1 year, exactly 1 year to the day, they have 2 collars, 2 people in custody, the mother, the foster mom, and the dad. So kudos to Bakersfield Police Department for jumping on this case and running with it. It took them a year, but they have both adoptive parents, the foster now adoptive parents, in custody, and I call them evil monsters because that's really what they are.
Yeah.
Brought against Trezell and Jacqueline West after the arrests were made. We are hoping to hear from law enforcement later this morning. You can follow this on air and online by going to our website.
So there you have it, Ed. Evil at its best. These two hid this crime from the general public. They hid the crime from the police department, made up a crazy story. Just your thoughts on the level of evilness behind this. We've seen many, many horrific crime scenes in our time, but Ed, your thoughts on this?
Well, we're going to get into it in the show, but when you read the indictment and you realized from the indictment what they did and how they did it and who assisted them, it really shows how depraved these individuals are. Okay. If it was up to me, I know there's a moratorium on the death penalty in California by their governor, but that should be taken away immediately. There are special circumstances involved here, and these two deserve it.
100%, Ed. I couldn't agree with you more. The circumstances surrounding these two small 3- and 4-year-old children, little babies. We sponsored the digital billboards for over a year. This channel has been responsible for keeping their names on Highway 99 and their faces out there through the generous donations of our supporters. So I want to also, again, give thanks and praise to each and every one of you here in the community on Crime Time with DutyRon. Ed and I are just so appreciative of you because this is your dollars at work for crime victims and their families. And we heard from Jennifer Nobles last night. We heard from Roro and all of the folks who are boots on the ground in Bakersfield. And they're just sending out a lot of love to this great community that we have amassed here. So kudos to each and every one of you. Joining us now from Queens, New York. I'm not going to give up his location because a lot of people will come to his door. Our revered criminal defense attorney and retired NYPD police officer, Joe Murray. Joe, thank you for taking out the time from your busy schedule. I know you got a really busy docket.
Yeah, well, listen, it's always a pleasure to see you two guys, but I wish it was under better circumstances. Just reading this indictment just breaks your heart. You know, when you see what they're accused of doing and what I believe the government will be able to prove, that it's just horrendous. So good to see you, and I'm happy to share any information I can. I am not a California attorney, but I have been studying copiously their penal code, and I hope to explain some of the issues in this case.
Yeah, and Joe, as we spoke earlier, I know that, we only had a brief time to chat, but we did talk about the murder second-degree charges. A lot of people are up in arms, and I want to kind of get that out of the way before we dive into this. Just if you can scathe on the outsides, the outside of the penal code for California. A lot of people are up in arms. These two young little babies their lives cut short by the very people who are supposed to be taking care of them. And the common folk are saying, why isn't this first-degree murder? Joe, can you just give a little bit of layman's terms explanation on that?
Yeah, I'll try to explain it. And generally, first-degree murder is usually considered in a death penalty state the death penalty qualifying charge. You have to have special circumstances in order to qualify for a death penalty. And that goes way back to the Supreme Court in Greg v. Furman when they struck down the death penalty, and then it was subsequently determined to be constitutional. But in any event, Section 187 of the Criminal Code defines murder in subdivision A. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought. Okay, that's Section 187. Section 188 defines malice. It could be express or implied. And malice is really your intent. So, like, just say, for example, I point a gun right at your head. Is there any doubt that I'm trying to kill you if I pull the trigger? No. But if you're in a crowd of people and I just start firing, am I intending to kill you, or am I implied if I end up killing Ed's, God forbid, Did I intend to kill Ed? No, but you can imply that because I did it in such a way that evinced the depraved indifference to human life. I could care less who I hit. I was trying to hit you, but I hit Ed. So it's either express or implied based on the conduct. So that's how they define their statutes. 189 of the Criminal Code gives the degrees. Now, here's first-degree murder. All murder that is perpetrated by means of a destructive device or explosive, that's the special circumstance, a weapon of mass destruction, knowing use of ammunition designed primarily to penetrate metal or armor, poison, lying in wait. That's like somebody just hanging out, waiting for DutyRon to get home, and I'm waiting for you, and then bam, I hit you.
Right.
Torture, that's a special circumstance. Torture or by any other kind of willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. That's planning a murder. When you actually develop a plan and then carry it out. And there is also, or that is committed in the perpetration of or attempt to perpetrate what we call felony murder. I won't go through all the underlying charges, but we call it felony murder. So anything else, it makes clear any other murder, wrongful killing of someone, is considered second degree. So unless you have one of those qualifying factors, it's not going to be first degree murder. But
Right.
What's interesting is they do, in one of the circumstances of aggravation, talk about planning. So, you know, it looks like it was a close case, but we don't really know the underlying facts that are going to support this charge. And it seems like, as we were discussing, looking at these circumstances of aggravation, that they actually solicited the other kids, but got them to act on their behalf, directed them to commit these acts. So I think this is horrendous. It's shocking, that they would use the other kids. But I got to tell you, I mean, a big issue I have, and maybe you can help me, what is the motive? Why would you do this? What gain did they hope to get from this?
Ed?
I don't know about the motive, but now that the cat is out of the bag that Joe let it out, folks, this was depraved acts of violence against these two children, orchestrated by the parents. They didn't appear to do the dirty work themselves. They were in control of it. What it appears they did is force their older children to commit these acts of violence on the younger children. And that's what's coming out of the indictment in the charges.
And that's what makes it so compounded in sickness.
It's sadistic. It's absolutely sadistic that you're taking another child, their brother and sister, like they love each other. But
look at some of these comments. People are talking about sounds like a cult. Oh my God. No, says Aunt BB. Oh my God. People are just shocked.
And they were tampering with the kids, because they didn't want them to testify. And so when the kids were taken away from them, it's my belief that all this information was derived from interviewing these children who gave up what exactly happened in that Bakersfield household and what happened to these two children. They probably don't know what happened with the disposal, but they definitely knew what was done and perpetrated to cause the death of these two children, because they were ordered and orchestrated to do it by the two parents.
And this is what brings me to the confidence level of the district attorney, as we saw today. And it was the first time I ever saw the district attorney speak. And she was very, very straightforward. She was, very stern in her delivery.
Matter of fact.
Matter of fact. And she didn't sway off when asked silly questions by the reporters. And you know what? Listen, okay, let me just back it up a minute. I love the reporters. They got a job to do, and they did what they had to do. They have to ask these questions. They tried to ask the best questions that they could, and again, they know that they're not going to be able to spill the beans. They have the integrity of this investigation to wait and bring it all out at a trial. I want to play this clip, and then I want to introduce our next guest. I know he is waiting you know what, I'm going to add him in now because he's waiting. He's over there in California, outside of Kern County, So, Dustin, thank you so much for taking out the time in your busy schedule. You know, you've been such a great friend from the get-go when it comes to this case, Orrin and Orson West. I reached out to you over a year ago, and you've been nothing but a professional. He is the co-director of the Kern County Human Trafficking. Is it a nonprofit, Dust? A nonprofit?
Yeah, grassroots. Yeah, Kern Coalition Against Human Trafficking.
Yeah, just let everybody know what they do briefly and how. And I mean, I'm just set up how we got together, but just let the audience know what your organization does in the Kern County area.
Yeah, well, first off, Ron, thank you for having me. Joe, Ed, nice to meet you guys, and thank you for your service. Our coalition basically brings all the subject matter experts when it has to do with human trafficking, whether it's of a child or an adult. We have weekly meetings and kind of strategize and talk about things. And you talked about earlier that I had been on your show before, and that was some of the things and myths that were coming out when the boys first went missing, that it was, human trafficking and they were forced into some type of child slavery. And we kind of came on to dispel some of the myths that were happening. Right.
Yeah. And we appreciate everything that your organization and your group does. What's the feel like for the people of Bakersfield, the people of Kern County? The Kern County District Attorney and the Sheriff's Department has supplemented Bakersfield and California City in the investigation. What's the sense over there in California? Is everybody just in shock with these allegations against these parents? It must be.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you two sides of it. You want to talk from the law enforcement side. There's a sense of relief, but I think you said it yesterday, this is just the beginning. The arrest, doesn't, that kind of opens the door, and they still got a lot of work ahead of them. You heard our district attorney, and you probably figured out real quick why we elected her. She is an outstanding and prosecutor. And to lead that office and to show what the fruition of those investigations was phenomenal. So she was able to kind of give, that anxiety that's been hanging over in the last 24 hours once it was announced. And once I sent you when I first saw that it was put out on media, yeah. That was happening. All these things went in motion. And yes, the community was in shock, and people like yourself and your followers and listeners, when they're heavily invested in something like this, and Ed and Joe can tell you, when you're involved in a case like this and there's a break in it, even if you're not involved in it, you're still affected. It reminds you of that one case that you had that very similar in the work that it took to get there. And then when you get somewhere. So I think people are still reeling from what was found out. I can tell you that not everyone has seen the affidavit. I think when they read the affidavit, especially on the law side, they'll be understand, and you can take your mind into an old case. But then the community is left with a lot of questions again.
Yeah, Dustin, we have access to the affidavit thanks to Bayan Wang. He's now in Denver, but he was part of 23 ABC. But before we get into getting into the affidavit, I want to play a little bit of media for everybody. But before we get into that, Denise, my good friend Denise, Nothing But Love, sent a $200 super chat. Very generous, very kind. One of our moderators inadvertently deleted her message, but I was able to save it because I'm special. So I was able to keep it. Denise Spalding sends in a super chat of $200, and she says, "Put it where you think it needs to go. I am too sick and angry to decide. I like to claim nothing but love, but this is so disturbing and disgusting. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The indictment info alone that you just shared is effing sickening."
Yeah.
Hugs, kisses, hugs, kisses. Denise, we all stand with you, locked arm in arm. That comment is right on the money. I think it puts it all into perspective of how we feel. And there's no words that even seasoned law enforcement professionals. Dustin has had his go at some law enforcement, and he's got a good background, military and whatnot, and so forth. He knows what evil is about. We all know. Ed, myself, Joe, Dustin. we've fought evil for many, many years. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's very hard, even when you've seen it so much, when we see little babies, and these were little babies, make no mistake, 3 and 4 years old, you can't fend for yourself.
You know, any idiot can make a child, male or female, but then not everybody can be a parent. And there are some people that are unfit to be a parent and should not have children at all. In this case, it seemed to me like these parents were using these kids as a money-making scheme from the government. The more kids they had, the more money they got from the government. And, you know, that needs to be cracked down on. I don't know what kind of background testing, psychological examinations that the adoptive parents go through or foster child parents go through, but it needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed immediately. You know, these kids, what can be more innocent than these two children? They have not lived their lives. Nobody is born a racist, a thug, a criminal, a nationalist, or, you know, a fascist. I mean, those things are taught. They're taught by the people that bring these children up. Okay. You know, I'm just heartbroken by this whole thing, and it's just tearing me apart.
Yeah, the emotions are running high. Dustin, on your end, what I wanted to ask you and say is this, is like, you know, again, law enforcement works hard on these cases. We have some community outrage, you know, that where are the boys? Why aren't they found? Everybody wants those answers quickly. Can you give us just a little bit of a background of like, of some of the knowledge? I know you have some friends who are still on the job and around in law enforcement. What type of man hours were put into this? I mean, you heard Chief Terry in the Bakersfield Police Department talk about every day there's a picture of those boys in the squad room working the case. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of man hours on this case, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Bakersfield Police Department, one of the finest agencies in the state. We worked with them a lot, obviously. In fact, driving home right now, they were on another homicide right down the street. So kudos to them. Lots of hours, as you guys know. I would imagine within their detective bureau, it was an all hands. They do have a large pool, and they probably did some type of small task force to handle this. And I imagine with the grand jury being involved, it was probably coordinated with the district attorney once they got involved in how they were going to go forward.
Right. And you and I spoke very lot of communication back and forth in January when we first started hearing about this process the ball starting to roll, and we kind of kept it down on the down low. And now that everything's out, this is how the wheels of justice that I talk about get going. But let's I'm taking up too much time here, so let me just play this little clip, and we will be right back into the. We're going to go over the indictment. We're going to read it. We're going to look at it. It's redundant. It's several pages of the same thing. So I'm going to bring up a page of it. And if you suffer from PTSD or any type of emotional distress, if you're not feeling good, maybe it's time to step out and tune out and maybe come back. It's just a disclaimer I have to put out there for you guys. All right, here we go.
17 News.
Good morning from the 17 Newsroom. I'm Maddie Jansen. We're breaking into programming to bring you new developments in the gut-wrenching case of those two little California City boys reported missing more than 14 months ago. Police have now confirmed that the adoptive parents of Orrin and Orson West have been arrested and charged in their deaths. Let's take a look at what we know so far. In just a few minutes, Kern County District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer will be holding a news conference with law enforcement leaders to discuss the recent developments in this case. We're going to take a live look at the district attorney's office right now. You can see everything is set up there in that room. We are set to begin in just about 4 minutes at 10 a.m. and we are going to bring that to you live. Here's what we know so far. Trezell and Jacqueline West, the adoptive parents of the two boys, have each been indicted for 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of child cruelty, and for filing a false report of an emergency. The charges are official confirmation of the worst fears of thousands of people who've been hoping and praying for the safe return of Orrin and Orson West. Even after 14 months of intense public scrutiny, we know very little about Trezell and Jacqueline West. Public records tell us that Trezell Philip West is 35 years old and Jacqueline Gabrielle Vasquez West is 32. Prior to last night, they had no local arrest records. In the last year and 2 months, there have been dozens of searches and scores of prayer vigils, but the Wests have never been seen attending. There have been 3 social media posts by, quote, the extended West family, but none by Trezell and Jacqueline. A yearbook confirms that Trezell was a 2004 graduate of Bakersfield High School. Public records show he held a security guard license that permitted him to carry an exposed firearm from March 2013 to March 2015. The exposed firearm permit was canceled when his guard license expired in 2015. We're taking you live now again to that press conference as have been eager to do anything they can to help. They've pledged various rewards.
I just want to stop it here. This is the billboard on Highway 99 that we have supported for over a year. That exact billboard is where the fundage went month after month to keeping those boys' names out there on Highway 99. And Dustin, I know you know where that is. That location is a high visibility area. And I'm proud that each and every one of you who has contributed to that, that's the board that kept their faces and their names out there. Everybody every day had to drive past that and see it. So I'm just so happy and proud that we were able to do that as a team together. All right, here's the district attorney. Let's go right to it.
Trezell and Jacqueline West.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Zimmer. I am Kern County's District Attorney. I have information about Orrin and Orson West, the 2 young boys who were reported missing from California City 14 months ago. On December 21st of 2020, Orrin was 4 years old and Orson was 3 years old. Their adoptive parents in California City, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, reported to the California City Police Department that the boys had disappeared from their backyard. The California City Police Department began a search for the boys in the area around their home. After a period of time, the FBI joined in the search, as did the California Highway Patrol and search and rescue from the Kern County Sheriff's Department. The community also came out to assist in looking for the boys, but to no avail. They were not located. 1 week later, crucial information came to light that necessitated the involvement of the Bakersfield Police Department and the Kern County District Attorney's Office. Law enforcement worked diligently, hundreds of hours in the next 12 months, looking for the boys. This morning, I'm saddened to announce that the investigation has revealed that Orrin and Orson West are deceased. The investigation has also revealed that they died 3 months before their adoptive parents reported them missing. However, I am pleased to announce that this week, the Kern County Grand Jury indicted Trezell and Jacqueline West, the adoptive parents, for the murder of Orrin and Orson West. The indictment charges 5 counts. The first count is murder. Charges them both with murder, with the victim being Orrin West. The second count charges murder, with the victim being Orson West. The third count charges felony child abuse against the person of Orrin West. The fourth count charges child abuse against the person of Orson West. And the fifth count charges false report of an emergency. Naturally, the first two counts carry the most time in state prison, murder. It is charged as murder in the second degree. That carries 15 years to life, but with two victims, the potential penalty or the maximum possible penalty, if convicted, is 30 years to life for each defendant, Trezell and Jacqueline West. Now, the grand jury indictment is a formal charging document, and we followed a process in charging them before the grand jury, and that was the district attorney requested that the grand jury convene to hear evidence regarding an indictment that we presented them. The district attorney's office then presented information to the grand jury, and the grand jury found there was sufficient evidence to hold Trezell and Jacqueline West responsible for these murders, and they returned what was called a true bill. So oftentimes we call it they were indicted, but what they did is returned a true bill on the indictment. Department 1 Superior Court judge issued warrants for the arrest of the defendants, and they were arrested last night at about 7 p.m. in Kern County. They are currently in the Kern County Jail waiting for an arraignment on the indictment, which will be tomorrow. There will be no preliminary hearing in this case because an indictment is a substitute for a preliminary hearing. In this case, will proceed directly to trial. The announcement of an indictment in this case probably raises a lot of questions about the facts of the case and what you and the public would like to know. I'm not permitted to go over the facts of the case in this case, but there is something that I'd like to discuss because the facts of the case are to be what we produce in the jury trial, because we want both the prosecution and the defense to have a fair trial in this case. However, one of the questions that I'm sure you would like to know is, have the bodies of Orrin and Orson been found? And the answer to that is no, they have not been found. However, I would like to emphasize that the fact that law enforcement have not found their bodies does not preclude a murder prosecution. As a matter of fact, there have been many hundreds of what we call no-body homicides prosecuted across the United States successfully, and even no-body homicides have resulted in murder convictions in Kern County. I'd like to introduce the people who are standing here with me today, who have been crucial in bringing this case forward. Eric Smith is the person to my right here. Eric Smith is the supervisor of the homicide unit at the DA's office. Next to him is Brian Estep, also a homicide prosecutor in the DA's office. And these two gentlemen are the people from my office who presented the evidence to the grand jury. And this grand jury hearing began 3 months ago in December of 2021. Mr. Smith, would you like to come say a few words?
On behalf of myself and, of course, Deputy District Attorney Brian Estep, I would like to thank the allied agencies who worked tirelessly throughout this investigation. That includes also the Kern Regional Crime Lab and also the DA investigators in this case. Kern County law enforcement worked together at first in an attempt to locate Orrin and Orson West. And as that continued, it turned into the investigation into the disappearance and ultimately the homicide of the two boys. The lead investigative agencies, Bakersfield Police Department, California City Police Department, they worked tirelessly throughout the course of this over a year since this occurred to follow up on leads and complete the investigation. Investigation that was continued even throughout the grand jury hearing. The indictment itself took approximately 3 months. Over 50 witnesses testified during the course of the indictment. Much of those witnesses' testimony was extremely emotional as it related to this case. But that's to be expected from a case that involves the murder of two innocent children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. To my right, to my left, are two chiefs of the lead agencies in this case that did most of the work. Bakersfield Police Chief Greg Terry and California City Police Chief John Walker. Chief Terry, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is not the outcome that we and so many had hoped and prayed for over the last year. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of Orrin and Orson, who, with this news today, their worst fears have been realized. I want to express my pride and appreciation to our homicide team, who invested so much personally and professionally to find the truth in this investigation. We now realize that the search for the boys began after the real tragedy had already occurred. But it is the work and diligence of the investigators, our partners, California City Police Department, the FBI, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and many, many other law enforcement agencies, community members, our own community members, and members of the public. That diligence, that refusal to give up is why we are here today. I also want to express my appreciation to our district attorney, Cynthia Zimmer, for her leadership and for her commitment to the safety of our families here in Kern County, no matter how difficult the case. We also would not be here without the teamwork and support of the district attorney staff. They provided invaluable support to our investigators, a perspective and advice and counsel along the way. And again, we would not be here without that support as well. And the last thing I would say is this is not a resolution in this case. And there will not be a resolution completely in this case until these boys are brought home.
Thank you, Chief Terry. Chief Walker, would you like to address the audience?
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Let me emphasize, first and foremost, this is a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. It was reported in my city that two small boys could be killed by their parents. But I do have to say how proud I am of my department from the second we got the call until we brought in so many resources, and we're very grateful for that. But the second we got the call, we were on scene. We began to work it and look for these kids. And we had so many agencies involved, Kern County Sheriffs, the Search and Rescue, CHP came with their helicopter to help us. But the citizens of Cal City came out in numbers to look for these kids. And then it began to grow to the outlying communities and eventually across the nation. We were getting people who were interested and they wanted to know where these kids were as well as us. And then eventually Chief Terry and the Bakersfield PD came in to help us out, and they've been instrumental to make this happen. So I want to thank all those people again for helping us to try to come to some kind of resolution with this. But again, the bottom line is we have two small boys that we believe are no longer here that are dead, and that's terrible. But again, I want to thank the district attorney, Cynthia Zimmer, for being brave and diligent to push this forward and actually bring this case to the surface. So we will push forward. We haven't given up, and we'll continue to give them any kind of help that they would need in the future.
All right, so I wanted to play that for everybody to see the hard work that the police chiefs, responding departments, but mainly to hear what the district attorney had to say. I want to start off with you, Joe Murray. You are still muted, by the way. What would you take on the district attorney speaking? What did you think of her? And just let the audience know what your feelings are.
I thought it was a excellent presentation, very professional. I think she's, sharp and being careful not to reveal too much, because this is a case that should be tried in the courtroom and not in the media. But you have a duty to report, that you have made progress. There is an arrest, there is an indictment. I wish she would have addressed the fact that it's an amended indictment. An amended indictment means that they had to go back to the grand jury for some reason to correct something or add something to the indictment. Eventually that will be revealed in discovery to the defense. But, I was just curious to, just myself, why we have an amended indictment.
Right.
Because it sounds like there was a very thorough investigation. They went through great lengths, 50 witnesses,
Right.
and put this thing together. And I think just reading it, as we all did before this presentation, that they really were thorough in the way they addressed this case and laid out all the circumstances of aggravation. So that's just one question I have about,
My question too, and this is looming for everybody that's in, not only just in the chat, but a lot of messages came into DutyRon.com. And is it possible that moving forward that charges could get upgraded or added to this indictment? Is that a possibility?
What commonly happens in federal court, they're always superseding the indictments in federal. I have a case now that, because the ongoing investigation, it never stops. It continues to go. And then they serve us with additional information, and they're going to now supersede the indictment. So it's entirely possible, especially in a case like this, a no-body homicide, that they're investigating. It really wasn't that long a period of time. I know that, that it seems like a long period of time, but for, when you consider how many homicides go unsolved and become cold cases, and what we believe with the cooperation of the other kids involved and other witnesses, I think this thing was developed and put together very methodically, just reading through this indictment. So I don't know if we'll see an upgrading of charges here because of the way they conducted this.
Ed, what was your takeaway from that press conference? I know you watched it before we played it here. I know everyone wants to hear your take on that.
Well, if you paid close attention, the DA gave up something very crucial. She said, in essence, 1 week after the reporting of the disappearance, the investigation transitioned to Bakersfield.
Right.
Okay. What happened 1 week after the reported missing?
They removed the kids.
Exactly right.
Thank you.
And the kids gave it up to their social workers and to the police there. And that's why that case got transitioned back to Bakersfield, because they know what happened. They were there. They witnessed it. They participated in it against their will, most likely. And that's why I don't think we have first-degree murder, because the parents didn't lay a hand on the kids. They made the children do the dirty work.
Yeah. Dustin, any thoughts or feelings on that?
Yeah, I'm with Ed on that one. That was very, those were questions, that you asked way back then, Ron, when, that was the big question. When did it happen? We know what happened, but when?
When and how?
When and how?
And don't forget the school records.
Right.
It's September. The kids are supposed to be back in school.
Right.
Okay.
Not so much Cincere and Classic, but their other children. Right.
Right.
I know exactly what you're saying, Ed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was COVID going on. September of 2020, COVID was still in full bloom. So remote learning was going on. Maybe the teachers were doing that remote learning with the older kids and didn't see the little ones. Maybe questions were coming up where they were pressed to have to present these kids, or people were asking. We will probably find this out once the trial commences. But what I thought, and I didn't get a chance to play it because I wanted us to talk rather than to watch this program. One of the reporters asked the district attorney about the notification to the biological family, and she snipped back at them. I don't know if anybody caught on to it, but she said, we didn't get a chance to notify them because you guys were on the scene when we were towing away the Winnebago, the RV. And you guys were on the scene, the media, and you were telling them that Trezell and Jacqueline West were in custody. She said, you did what we were supposed to do before we were able to do it. I don't know. Did anybody in the chat, anybody catch on to that? She snipped at them. I'm going to see if I can fast forward it to that point, but I think it will be hard for me to find it. It was when she was taking the Q&A and they were asking them, did you notify the family first about, collar commencing? And she said, no, we didn't get a chance to because you guys did.
There was a question in the chat about the RV and whether the the adoptive parents were in the RV at the time of arrest? And the answer is yes. They were initially being interviewed. They were wearing disguises, and they were initially interviewed by a news reporter who did not realize that they were talking to the adoptive parents. They got into the RV. They were under surveillance the whole time. And then the RV was driving down the road when law enforcement conducted the car stop and arrested them on the warrant.
Right. Yeah. And that's how it all went down for the most part. And we're going to probably hear some other variations of that. But I want to say, again, thank you to everyone who's given Super Chat. Denise with the $200 Super Chat, very generous. And I think one of my mods made a mistake and deleted her comment by mistake. She sent me a message privately and said, please, 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 DutyRon, tell her I didn't mean it. So that was that happened by mistake. Vet Girl RWB sends in a $20 Super Chat and says, God bless these two beautiful little boys. They are angels and victims of a heinous, heinous crime at the hands of their parents that adopted them, directed to their children. And that's what makes it even more horrific, because now you have 4 additional victims who now have to go through the rest of their lives with this trauma. They've effectively ruined their 2 biological children and their other 2 adopted children's lives forever. And that's another thing that we don't take into account here. You know, we're caught up on Cincere and Classic, Orrin and Orson West, but these other 4 children are now permanently damaged for the rest of their lives. So there's a lot more to this.
Ron, what was it? The oldest child at the time was either 12 or 13 years old?
I'm unsure of it because there was so many. I heard under that age. I heard over. So I'm not really sure. I'm going to get with Roe and get the complete ages before we talk on it. Mm-hmm. But we know that they were up and above 6, 7, 8. You know, close to into the teen years, perhaps. But again, it doesn't matter when a child is at that 7 or 8 year age. They remember these things. You know, it's hard to kind of get that out. You know, so
I would just be careful. I mean, protecting the anonymity of these kids. I mean, you know,
right. I don't know.
They're gonna have to deal with so much to begin with. Not to now have, you know, we've identified them in some way or in enough detail that somebody figures out.
Yeah.
You know.
I just want to know for my own self now that Ed brought it up, and it was a very good point, you know, to bring that up, because these are kids that are going to have to, again, go their whole entire life with this horrific act on their minds. And
well, if the state of California is doing their job right, they should have been in counseling immediately after the information came from them.
Yeah, I would hope so. So again,
that also leads, you know, the question about a trial. You know, putting these kids through a trial and, you know, testifying. And I mean, this is something that I think should be a factor to consider and try to work something out and resolve this case. I mean, I know everyone wants the worst possible penalty for these people, but you got to think about these kids.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. It's happened before. If the DA makes the deal, hey, give up where you deposited the bodies and we'll reduce the charges, or and then plead guilty and we'll reduce the charges.
Right. And I want to just point out, Jennifer Noble says, and we know this because we spoke about this before we started tonight, two of the children out of the 4 are actually their biological children. The other 2 are adopted. And we had discussions about the adoption for money. And Dustin, I know that you know about that conversation real well. You know, Kern County, DCYF, and in Bakersfield, you know, there's lots of different things that are said about what goes on within those agencies. We don't know. We're not attached to them. I don't know anything about them. But what I'm saying is there's been conversations in California City, in Bakersfield, and everywhere in between Kern County about people exploiting the system. There's probably very good foster and adoptive parents out there. I know of many myself. But what I'm saying is that some people try to manipulate the system and get over. And that's the unfortunate part. I just wanted to say quickly, before we put up the indictments and whatnot, again, if you suffer from PTSD, there's some wording in here that Joe and Ed are going to go over that may be troubling for you to hear. So if you do have anything in that regard, I would just suggest that you maybe tune out and maybe tune back in at a later time. So let me just share that up on the screen. I just want everybody in the chat to give me a thumbs up if you can read the lettering. I know some of you might have not be able to see it, but this is the best way I can share it.
Scroll down a little bit.
Okay, so the aggravating
So
circumstance.
we know we get to the top. Okay.
All right, hold on a second, Ed. Give me a second. Let me just change the page because, wait a second. This is what happened before. All right, you want me to get to the top of this page, right?
Yeah.
All right, give me 2 seconds. The way I saved it is just making it difficult for me to share
Did you
it.
check your email? I sent you the PDF with it.
Okay. All right. Let me do that. Let me remove myself here. You guys take over and talk, and I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
this is horrendous. I got to tell you. I mean, when you think about they're putting the kids to work. First of all, what is the motive? I mean, if we're talking about they took these kids for financial gain, then what is the motive to kill them and the way they kill them? You know, like I can't.
Well, I'm assuming, I think they were adopted. And if I am correct, when you adopt a child, there's no financial, you don't get money anymore. When
Oh,
you
right.
father-
Fostering.
you get money. Adopting a child, those children are yours. It's your responsibility to pay for them. So when Ron talked about that was coming up about the money motives thing, that was the first thing that popped in my head. When you adopt a child, that child's yours. Hence why they have the name change. Why they have their name.
They were originally fostered and then adopted.
I think that's normally how the process goes. You foster a child, and then you apply for adoption. If you're, but there's foster parents out there that they just have a revolving door, and they're constantly going through background checks and all that stuff. But they're both at a high level of backgrounds and stuff. But when it's the adoption, that's a level of that because that's awarded by a judge. That's awarded by the court.
You never do understand these things. I had a couple of cases where a child was murdered by the baby's mother's boyfriend because he spilt milk, and the boyfriend gut punched the kid, and he bled internally to death over 3 days without seeking medical care for the child. And then I've had cases where no body was recovered, and we managed to get the homicide conviction without ever recovering the body of a mother and son, a con artist team that actually LA County took too for another case out there. They murdered a real estate person out there. It's just crazy. I don't know. What was this? Some kind of Fight Club scenario? I mean, I'm just I can't wrap my head around what could have motivated them, as Joe said, to do this. I mean,
how did they not think the kids would not say anything?
COVID.
Well, I mean,
they were talking about, when COVID, when the schools open up, you're going to have a bunch of disclosures from children about what has happened in the home, whether it's something as heinous as this or something as simple as just a regular child abuse, child molest, whatever it was. As soon as the children felt comfortable enough, and I'm not talking about in this case particular, but just any child, as soon as they got to school and got to that comfortable counselor or that teacher they knew, then the disclosures start coming.
Oh yeah, I can imagine like domestic violence and stuff like that.
Yeah, but these kids must have had the fear of God put into them by their parents that if you speak, I'll kill you too. And that's why you have those charges in here that these witnesses were intimidated by the two, the father and the mother.
Yeah, they must have disclosed something specific for that charge. Yeah, there have to be because that happens all. Whether it's a guilt trip they put on the children, but it must have been something strong enough that to forget those charges.
Now, where they were living in Bakersfield, was that a housing development or a private home?
Casaloma is a private development. It's almost like gated where
it's actually gated. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a planned urban development. Okay. So, there are 50 witnesses. I imagine a few of those witnesses coming from that development.
All right. So, Joe, you didn't send me the email, so I had to go get it myself. Thanks anyways.
What?
You suck. Anyway, so here's page 1. We'll get to page 2. I'm not sure if everybody could see that well. I'm going to put it full screen and then make it bigger. Let me go full screen. We'll be off. And you want me to get up to the top of it, right?
Yeah. So, folks, what you're going to be looking at is the indictment counts, and there's going to be the same wording and the same counts for each child, so it's repetitive.
All right. So, who wants to read this, Joe or Ed?
Okay. Yeah. So that's I have my own here that I just emailed you again just to make sure you have it. But count 1, Penal Code Section 187. Remember, this is what I referred to in the beginning, 187, where they define murder. So on or about September 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did, with malice aforethought, murder Orrin West, a human being, in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, second-degree murder, a felony. It is further alleged that the above offense is a serious felony within the meaning of Penal Code Section 192.7C1. Then if you look at the circumstance and aggravation, these are the ones that are so painful to actually consider. So view with discretion. It is further alleged that the defendant Trezell West and Jacqueline West committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, and callousness within the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.421A1. And again, these are aggravating circumstances that could enhance the penalty. It is further that the victim, Orrin West, was particularly vulnerable within the meaning of California Rule of Court 4.421. Again, the age of the kids makes them particularly more vulnerable. It's further alleged that the Wests, I'll just say, induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission within the meaning of California rules. So here, this is the one we're talking about. They induced the other children, is what we're assuming, to participate in this crime.
Now, let me ask you, if this was not assumed to be the children, you would be talking about an adult, therefore would be it would turn to an arrest of additional perpetrators, is what I was trying to say. If this statement here, circumstance in aggravation, if that pertained to an adult, now we would have a third or a fourth piece arrested.
An accessory.
Yes.
Possibly, unless they were a cooperating witness that broke this case,
Right.
But I think the logical thing is that they induced the kids to do this. That's the logical.
I think that comes out in the next paragraph.
Yeah. It's further alleged that the West, I'll just do this shorthand, took advantage of a position of trust or confidence to commit the offense within the meaning of California rules. So, yeah, I mean, how do you interpret that? They took advantage of a position of trust. A parent-child relationship is a position of trust.
Ed, you want to talk about that a little bit? I know you and I spoke about it and you came right to that conclusion. And there's a lot of people in the chat that are confused and saying, wait, why is everybody saying that they forced their other children to participate in whatever it was, a beating, a stomping?
I think later on in the indictment, it states that a little more clearly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got to get to the next page.
Count 2, Penal Code Section 187, murder. Okay, this is pertaining to Orrin West. Essentially, then we go to the circumstances. It's further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, callousness, same thing. Mm-hmm. Also charging the aggravation of a particularly vulnerable within the meaning of California rules. Essentially, these are very similar okay, leadership or dominance of other participants. You know,
Keep
again,
going on. It speaks about minors being involved.
yeah, and then we go down again. That the manner the crime was carried out indicates planning, sophistication, or professionalism within the meaning of the rules.
Next page.
We go down to the next page. They took advantage of a position of trust or confidence to commit the offense within the meaning of the California rules. And then count 3. This is the West did willfully harm or endanger Orrin West, a human being, in violation of Penal Code Section 273A. Committed a crime that involved great violence, threat, great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty. These are similar aggravating factors. The vulnerable person, and then we go down, induce others to participate.
Where's the part that you're speaking about, Ed?
Check. What's the next page?
Induced a minor to commit or assist in the commission of the crime. That's what you're talking about, Ed.
That's it right there.
That's the one. When you talk about inducing a minor,
that's
why we're looking at the kids.
It's right there on the top of the page.
Top of page 5.
Oh, okay, right here. Okay. Yeah. So this section here, circumstances in aggravation, you see some of this stuff is so redundant that you could just actually miss that. So it's important that people, let me just make this as big as possible so everybody could see it. So this is what we're talking about right here.
Induce a minor, but now even look at the next one. This is inducing a minor to assist in the commission of a crime. And then you go to the next one. It says they threatened witnesses, unlawfully prevented or dissuaded witnesses from testifying, suborned perjury, or in another way illegally interfered with the judicial process. So how else can they have done that if they were not their own kids? You know, I mean, everyone was watching this family. The news was all over them. So the only place where they were not watched was inside the home. You know?
Let me ask you, gentlemen, and this goes to all of us here on the panel. In this statement here, it's further alleged and the threatening of witnesses. Is this, in layman's terms, them saying that Trezell and Jacqueline West themselves threatened anybody if they came forward that we would potentially kill you or hurt you? This is what this sounds like to me, because I've been on many interrogations and interviews where people have said, okay, I'm going to tell you what happened, but I'm going to tell you that these people wanted to kill me if I said anything. They told me if I told the police, I would be dead. I would be in pieces, or whatever the case may be. Does this sound like something like that?
This is witness tampering. This is obviously, you know, they're threatening someone to dissuade them from testifying. They're not saying anything, you know.
You know, and it could be a idle threat. It could be something. You know, you're putting a guilt trip on someone, a family member. You know what's going to happen to me if you talk. Blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
it's not idle after 2 kids get killed.
Right.
Yeah. So these people knew what the West did and what they did to their 2 little babies.
And who knows who they talk to? We always catch these bad guys because they can't keep their mouth shut. All right.
50 people were brought forward, Ed, in this grand jury.
They told somebody. They told
it's
somebody.
Important to understand that all 50 of these people did not witness them killing these kids, but they may have corroborated certain aspects of it. And that's where I think these people were threatened or dissuaded not to participate, you know, because they may not have been, you know, they could have been somewhat collateral, but just confirming certain facts that.
Ed, what was the point that you were trying to bring up?
The same thing, what Joe just said. You know, you got 50 witnesses in there. Some of them have to be neighbors. Some of them have to be people that these parents spoke to and may have let out what they had done. Okay, maybe seeking help or whatever the case may be. You know, and then, you know, you have the neighbors over there. There's probably a lot of electronic evidence as well. Cell phones, you know, doorbells, like rings and surveillance cameras, you know, that might have caught movements in and around that time frame between September, the 1st of September and the end of September. So
this is Thuggery 101 right here, Major League. Is there any more that we could care to go over, Joe, before we open it up to questions? Because I'm already at the 1 hour and 5 minute mark, and I know that you told me after an hour it is billed at $8.50 an hour. Joe raised his rates on me because he's in such high demand.
If
So,
only. If only. No,
anything-
they're all essentially duplicative of the other ones. It's redundant, but that's, I think, inducing a minor,
right?
Kind of like paints the picture for us.
Yeah. And both of these perpetrators are in their 30s, right? I think Trezell's
32 and
36
35 or something.
35 and 32, 36 and 32. Again, thuggery 101. Dustin, do you have anything that you might want to add into about this complaint, or do you think we kind of covered it all here?
No, I think it covered it. And as you look at it, you can almost build a timeline. If you look at how things were done, and you can speculate that because that specific word in there to change the judicial process.
Right.
So if word got to them that the grand jury convened and they started reaching out to potential witnesses, it doesn't matter in a murder case. It doesn't matter how you, again, like what Ed said, if it's idle or not, still a threat.
Right.
Yeah. And if the witnesses came forward and told the DA, hey, they called me, if the DA was smart, they might have done some controlled phone calls and got it on recording.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would have done that.
There's so much more that we will hear once the trial commences. And I have to overemphasize this to the audience. Our friends or people who are, really invested in this, be patient. We waited 14 months to get to where we are at the prize of the arrest. The wheels of justice are just now getting going. There's so much more to this, and we will hear about it once a trial commences. However, Joe, and I'm glad we have you here tonight, if Trezell and Jacqueline West come into that courtroom and plead guilty, where are we at, Joe?
Well, that would be a negotiated plea. So they would have their attorneys in discussions with, and I think like Ed pointed out, discovering where these bodies are. Can I just ask a question? Because I wasn't really, digging deep into this. Was that Winnebago ever forensically examined?
Okay. Crime scene was on it. Ed, I'm going to let you take it because you are the crime scene expert. I know that you did your homework because you are thorough.
I do remember seeing it being looked at. I do remember evidence techs coming out of various locations with evidence up in Bakersfield, bags full of evidence. I don't know what it contained. Don't know what they found. But I would hope so. I would hope that would have been the case with the Winnebago.
Right. And I just want to add, and I don't mean to cut you off because I'll let you continue, but last night I saw several YouTube channels, and KCAHT was on scene at the location where Trezell and Jacqueline West allegedly was taken into custody on the roadside. And there was crime scene unit. The crime scene unit truck was there. So evidence collection was on the scene last night, in and out of that Winnebago, whatever, RV, whatever you want to call it. I don't know the history of it. I don't know if they had it for a really long time. I'm sure that the FBI, the Bakersfield Police Department, and anybody that was in this case had eyes on that Winnebago or RV. And again, we don't have access to the case files, but you could bet your bottom dollar if this has been brewing, FBI, local and state, federal, whatever partners were conducting this investigation, they definitely had eyes on that RV because they don't want them to leave the country. Don't forget the Mexican border. Dustin, how close is it?
Oh, you're about a 5-hour drive.
There you go.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, I know he is pressed for time, but this is a good friend of Crime Time with DutyRon, a good friend of mine personally. Bayan Wang from 23 ABC, now in Denver, is kind enough to join us here tonight. He has done such outstanding coverage as an investigative news reporter, but he's a friend and he's here. I want to add him in. Bayan, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry I'm late. I was doing some other coverage for this stuff, but I don't want to repeat or waste anybody's time because I haven't been, following or know what you guys have been talking about for the last hour. But what a huge development today, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Bayan, I want to say right off the bat, there's 2,500 people here watching this live show. you have been unbelievable in your coverage. You've been thorough, you've been fair, you've been, just such a great resource for not just us retired detectives, but for the community at large. And we want to say thank you to every ounce of effort that you've put into this. You definitely are just so important to the people who are invested. These are two little boys who just vanished off the face of the earth, but now we know, fast forward 14 months later, what we got. What are your thoughts on where we are today, Bayan?
Well, I mean, it's been 14 months in the making, right? I think throughout this entire process, there have been so many questions, a lot of them still not answered, but I think the main ones in terms of who do investigators believe is directly responsible for the boys going missing. And as we learned from the DA, they believe the boys died 3 months before parents even reported them missing. So what are my thoughts? Man, my thoughts have been all over the place. Didn't get much sleep last night, just trying to think just about over the course of the last year and trying to piece this, investigation together, and only having so many resources to do so. But I think from the get-go, a lot of people had suspicion that the adoptive parents were involved in some way. And today they're learning, actually late last night, that the district attorney and prosecutors feel the same exact way. So,
yeah, and a grand jury.
And a grand jury, yeah. But
that's the big one, yes.
Bayan, early on, you were on panel with me, retired sergeant from the homicide squad, Detective Sergeant Bill Cannon. We spoke probably around 8-9 months ago, and we spoke about it was coming from our detective sense. We felt that the boys never made it to California City, and I think we were right on that, obviously, as we know today. They never made it down into California City. That was a whole ruse and a story that was made up. You were right in front of Trezell and Jacqueline West. What was your feeling when you were there with your associates from the various outlets? Well, I asked you this once before, but I have to ask you again. What was the vibe? What was the feel that you got in your inside? What was the feel that you got from that story that they told you guys?
Well, think about how many things were going on around that time. I mean, we didn't even know that we were going to be able to get an interview from Trezell and Jacqueline. I think, we first heard from Ryan Dean, the biological mother of the boys. And I took a 4-minute clip of what she said, saying that she talked to Trezell and Jacqueline. She thinks they did something. And I posted it on Facebook. And before that, I don't think there was any indication that they would talk. 15 minutes after I posted that, they were out and ready to chat with us, and it was go time. We had no idea what was going to be said, and after what was said, I think you and Bill Cannon and the other experts you had on your show started picking apart those things, the body language, the statements, and now they're sitting behind bars. So my feeling of it, I think everybody was shocked at what we heard. But it doesn't matter what we think. It matters what investigators think. Yeah. And now 14 months down the line, here we are.
And we had John Walker, who had a couple of sit downs with you. You were communicating with him on a regular basis until Bakersfield took over the investigation. And we heard from John Walker, and he said, these are our boys. And for him to say that at a press conference, and he's on his way out the door, I communicated with him personally throughout this whole thing, here and there. A complete gentleman, and he was completely, fully invested in finding and getting to the bottom of what happened to these boys. So here we are today, and the wheels of justice sometimes take a long time to come to the finish line. Now it's in the hands of the prosecutor's office. We need the district attorney to get that guilty verdict at the end. And we'll see where we go from here. But I do want to let the audience know that, you have been, again, in touch with me. I was really, really very moved when you transferred and you got your promotion. You went to Denver, and I was sitting out in the backyard, and it was nice and warm back then. And you said to me, DutyRon, the only thing that I regret is that we didn't get to the bottom of this case of these boys before I left and got a new assignment. And that really took that was my turning point for our friendship, because I said, this is a real person who really cares. You know, not saying that all reporters don't care about the cases that they cover, but that told me right then and there that Mr. Bayan Wang is really, really, he's invested in this. And here we are, fast forward months and months later, and we're still communicating. You sent me a message last night at 12:30. I was in bed and I said, you know, this is great because it shows me that he is watching. And I didn't go to sleep till 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't fall asleep. But you know, we need to have the wheels of justice continue on. And this is just the beginning. Joe, you spoke about it. Criminal defense attorney, you're on, you know, many of these type of cases. You see many different situations. The sticking point is the adversity that the district attorney will come up against without having these boys' bodies recovered. Joe, I know you talked about it in the beginning of this broadcast. Again, reiterate for the audience some of the challenges maybe that the DA may come up on with a no body recovery double murder case.
Yeah, that's always a problem. The biggest, most obvious problem is the district attorney now has the burden of proving that, first of all, they're in fact dead. You know, I just from extrapolating from what we see in this indictment, I should say amended indictment, we know that they solicited minors. So we're talking about the other kids. So that also brings about an issue. These are young kids. And the interviews, I guarantee you, they were all recorded. It's very important when you conduct interviews, especially of young children, that you're not using leading questions. They're open-ended questions. You're not suggesting anything to the kids. So that's going to come under great scrutiny. We heard about all these other witnesses and the possible witness tampering. So, you know, just getting back to your question about the no-body homicide, I think they can, you know, based on what we see here, they can put together a picture of the torture and great bodily harm that was inflicted. I don't think it'll be hard for a jury to make a reasonable inference that they're dead because they're now gone and disappeared. However, it's another burden that the government is going to have to satisfy. But I think, again, the big sticking thing here will be that if they did interview these children, the manner in which they did it, the type of questioning that they did, I have no reason to doubt the qualifications of law enforcement that were involved in this case. I think they put together, you know, from reading this indictment, a very thorough investigation. But it is something that I'm going to be looking forward to see what develops.
Yeah. I pray they have electronic evidence in the form of controlled telephone call conversations where the parents admit to what they've done to spare these kids any more trauma so they don't have to testify. I like the district attorney's confidence in the case, and she's saying, we're going straight to trial. Right. So I think she's got a solid case. If she's that confident and talking about going straight to trial immediately, it sounds like they dotted their I's and crossed their T's, and it is a very solid circumstantial case without the bodies.
Yeah. And we can only hope and pray that we have that electronic evidence. Electronic evidence is really solid, and I feel that, unless these people were really dotting their I's and crossing their T's, that we may see some of that come from Google searching. We're going to hear about all kinds of electronic evidence that the state and the feds and everyone has extracted from all the different devices. This is the day and age that we live in. Everybody's using their phones. Everybody's using the computers.
Can I just follow up on something Ed just said there? And I agree with you, Ed, and I find that sometimes prosecutors get lost in their mission to punish the bad, and they lose sight of the collateral damage that could be, resulting with these kids by going through a prosecution. So I do hope, I agree with you. I think she's doing a great job and I have no complaints, but I hope there is some compassion there, that maybe there would be a plea offered or something to resolve this, and not just plea to the charge, maximum sentence, life without parole. I think that, maybe revealing the bodies or just avoiding dragging these kids through even more trauma. So I do hope, I agree. I think that it's great that she's aggressive and confident in her case, but I do hope there's some compassion there that maybe something could be worked out to avoid a trial.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to just say this, for those of you who are in the chat, I see the questions, I see the comments coming in. Listen, on this panel here, you have over 60 years of law enforcement between the service of all of the great guys that I have on here. None of us want to see Jacqueline or Trezell West get out and see the light of day and breathe the air going forward. And I can tell you this, if the district attorney has everything all in place, these two, upon conviction of both of these charges, will not be seeing the light of day in our lifetime and in their lifetime. So that's what we hope and pray for. And that's the only thing that we can hold on to, is that the justice system will prevail. And these evil folks, these are evil monsters. And there's no other nice way for me to put it. These are evil monsters. It takes a really special kind of evil to do the things that we've read here in the paperwork that was released today. And I think everybody here we're all in agreement on that. You know, these are not people that should be walking the streets. And there's plenty more, unfortunately, out there. I think we covered everything. And I want to say thank you to Bayan Wang. You know, you're in Denver. You made your adjustments. You and I have spoken on and off on the phone. I hope that you and the missus and the rest of your family are doing great. And I thank you. I encourage everyone to go over to Court TV. I think you were on with Vinny tonight. Go and look at all of his coverage. I will link Bayan's social media, Facebook. Most of the people here know you. Any kind of final words or anything for the folks? And I know this won't be your last time here, but I always like to get your thoughts because everybody really respects you tremendously, Bayan.
Well, I think you guys hit on, I believe you guys hit on all the dynamics of today's developments already. I would just say last words, at least for tonight, is just, I appreciate not just you and your coverage and the experts you bring on in this case, but really the entire community, whether it's the YouTube community, the people on the ground in Bakersfield or Cal City or really anywhere who've been following this case so closely, have messaged me, have messaged you, have had their questions. I think that's the biggest frustration for me. A lot of the questions people message me are the same exact questions I'm trying to get answered by somebody else. And I'm sure you see a lot of the same. But guys, I see all your comments. I see all your messages. I really appreciate it. It's incredibly motivating. And it's really, really appreciated. So I think about you guys often, and I hope there is closure in this case for everyone.
Amen to that, bro. Thank you. I know everybody here has tremendous respect for you. Bill couldn't be on tonight. I told him that you might be coming on. You know what he said? He said, tell Bayan I said hello. So Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, he sent in regards to you. I know this is past his bedtime. That's why he couldn't make it. He's up there in his 60s, so he's getting there.
Yeah, I haven't seen Bill in a while. Someone ought to do a welfare check on him.
Yeah. There you go. Maybe we should send out the old 2-4 precinct to go and check on him.
Do a knock on the door.
Yeah.
Thank
Tell
you,
Bill I
Bayan.
said hi too. Yeah.
Thank you, Bayan. We'll speak to you soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Bye.
Take care, Brian.
What a great guy. Again, I can't overemphasize. This is the part of law enforcement and the media. I became friends. I consider him a dear friend now. I would do anything for that guy because I think that the amount of information, the way he's presented his stuff is just nothing short of just excellent. So I would have never met him if it wasn't for this case. It wasn't for YouTube. So these are some of the good things that come out of this. And the true crime community has a whole host of different dynamics. There's everything from toxic to drama to everything in between. We get and we have these communications and contacts. I met Mark Class from the Class Kids Foundation because of Bayan Wang. I get the ideas of people who I should interview from him. He looks at some of the things that we do. The media that's their job. They want to report on what's going on. Again, I think it's a great thing that we made friends and we have him here to talk to the community. Any words, Ed? I know you're ready. You're jumping.
Yeah, well, I believe tomorrow is arraignment, right?
There you go.
So let's see if they no bail application and they keep him in.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for a no bail, and it said it on some of the paperwork. But again, his defense attorney, which is probably going to be assigned, the defense is going to ask for bail, right? That's part of the process, Joe, right?
Of course. You want it's so much easier to fight a case from the outside. It's very difficult from the inside, but usually in a homicide case, a murder case, bail is usually denied. I mean, there are occasions. I did have a case I'm working on, this guy's appeal, where he was out and actually found not guilty of the murder, but guilty of a manslaughter. So it does happen, but in a case like this, I shouldn't say that, because I know with all this bail reform sweeping the country, there's all kinds of crazy things happening. But my gut is that nobody's going to release them.
Yeah, especially after witness tampering.
Right. Yeah. I have a question that came in from Jackie. This came straight to my social media. She said, Ron, can you ask Joe if they take a plea before the trial, we might not see the case the state has? Absolutely.
Yeah. If that plea comes out before a trial, that there's no reason for them to disclose anything.
Right.
That's sad for the viewers who are interested to find out the details of the case. But again, for the family and the kids, not to have this all aired out there. I think that there's some compassion, that hopefully, and a lot of prosecutors, I commend them for what they do. I actually campaigned to be a district attorney, but I think they lose sight sometimes of the damage, that the rest of the family suffers, and the witnesses and family members, just to get that conviction. And it's important. The conviction is important. But I hope, in a case like this, God, already what we see, what's happening with these kids is just sad.
Yeah. Melissa Hollins sent in I'm sorry, Dustin. Melissa Hollins sent in a $10 super chat, and she said, can any of your panel members give an educated guess as to when a trial may commence? Thank you for that question.
Yeah, that would be tough to say, because we don't know the minutia about what's happening. There'll be something called the Bill of Particulars, which heightens the allegations, gives you more details. Whether or not there were search warrants, they may want to controvert the search warrants and challenge that. We have the kids. I'm not sure what the ages are, and the questioning and how they did the questioning. That could be subject to a hearing. So we really don't know the details of what's going on there. But whoever's assigned to this case, I think they're going to be very thorough in exercising all their rights and challenging the evidence. That's what we do as criminal defense attorneys. We put the evidence to the test.
Right.
We want to make sure that, what is alleged actually happened.
That's why I don't like you guys.
I know.
Dustin, you had a question, and I cut you off so rudely. Go ahead with it.
Oh, I was going to say, I almost forgot it now, but I think I may have. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Right. So
I think it had to do with kind of when you're reading that indictment, not to go too much to the indictment, but if how the family dynamic was happening and how the children were involved in this, and I'll go to human trafficking when someone's in control.
Exactly.
Okay, so it talked about that control. And how people maybe can't wrap their mind and how someone can influence someone else to do something. We see this a lot in human trafficking. You can't understand, well, why? You see it in domestic violence. Well, why did that woman stay in that relationship for 20 years? Why did that prostitute do all those things that pimp made them do? People can't wrap their heads around it. But you can see the same. If someone is a manipulator and someone's a con and someone's a perp, they're going to make sure they know how to manipulate the people they know how to manipulate and victimize them. Absolutely. And now I remember exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say the family, everyone that's left behind now, they're survivors. They're going to be survivors of this. This is going to take, and I've seen some of the comments, this is going to take forever to undo this trauma. Even if it was in a short time span, the things that they saw, young children are not meant to see.
Yeah.
And to undo that, and you all know you had cases, we can talk all day about the cases we had, but this one's reached national news. Ron and I talked about that at first when everything first happened, and just how it spread all over. And I'll go back to it earlier. I think our community will heal from it, but it's going to take a lot of time. And kind of what Joe said, I would imagine the defense attorneys, whether they're assigned, we have an indigent defense program here. If the public defender, I mean, good attorneys come out of California. So it's going to be interesting. And I do see it being a while. So,
yeah, I hope the kids can be helped, but many times the damage is done and it can't be undone.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you don't mind, I know I've held you all a really long time. Joe, I'm already halfway into that $800, so it's 400 and something an hour.
We got an office in Manhattan or something.
Yeah, half hour wait. So it's I owe like $423.75. So I want to just go to the chat if you guys don't mind, because they've been chatting it up and we've been talking. So I love you guys. I respect the live chatters. I love the replay viewers. So if you guys have any questions in regards to this case, not anything that's outside of the indictment and, criminal defense side, criminal side, if you have any questions, now's the time to light it up. I can just only pick and choose a couple of folks that come in with some of the questions. Michelle says, I love police off the cuff. How could you not? Those guys are great. They're awesome. Let's see if there's any questions that are coming in. I have the year in review that I'm going to play. It's only a 3-minute video. It's going to show you everything that recaps up until the year, December 31st, 2021, and then we'll wrap it up. Separate.
Can I just say something real quick? Because I think you're too humble of a person. The work that you put into this case, the money you raised, the billboards you supported, constantly keeping this case on the forefront, on people's minds, in the media. I think it's incredible. We saw with the Bethunes how important public engagement, if they didn't hear about this, the story on the news or in the media, they wouldn't have known to check their cameras and see and find the van. Guys like you and all of you guys that are out there putting this out there, commentating on it, I think it's amazing. I never experienced anything like this. I mean, you were the one, you and Police Off the Cuff, like you guys introduced me to this, and seeing this true crime community coming together across the globe. It's not even just locally, it's across the globe.
Amen.
So I really commend you. I don't think you give yourself enough credit for all the efforts that you put forth.
I'm going to tell you why I don't give myself that credit. And I'm going to say this on Solo Screen, because it's not my efforts solely. It's the efforts of this entire community. You see, I built the Crime Time with DutyRon from the ground up, right? So it started out with no subscribers and we worked our way up. But we developed this community through consistency, consistent respect for the victims and families, consistent coverage of valid information, no rumors, no, going into fake book land and running with nonsense. I do my research, I do my detective work, and I do it with all of you guys as professionals. But without the audience and without the user participation, which are the folks that are here right now and the folks who will watch this replay, we could not do this. So I give credit to more so to these folks, Joe, Ed, and Dustin. I give credit to these folks because these are the folks who made this happen. And Ed and I, we talk about this behind the scenes, and Ed is a teacher. He loves to teach, and he has such a craft for evidence collection, DNA, the crime scene lab. And I mean, this guy can run circles around all of us. So Ed, I'm honored that you're here with me. Joe, I'm honored to have you. Dustin, Bayan Wang, all of the guests that we have come on here are top notch. And that's what you get here on Crime Time with DutyRon. So it's everybody. It's an effort amongst all of us. Ed, I know you're chomping at the bit again.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, you brought me into this. Well, thanks to our friend. In God we trust, all others we polygraph. No, I mean, you're right. I do enjoy this. I do enjoy speaking. It's your audience, though. You brought me into this, and I'm happy to help you and happy to educate all the true crime family out here on the various forensic aspects of criminal investigations and so forth. So it's my pleasure to be here, and I love your audience. You can tell they're sharp. They're not big conspiracy buffs per se. I mean, you have a few that come on, but they soak up the information like a sponge.
Right, and here it is. There it is. In God we trust. All others we polygraph. So this is from our friend Timmy Acosta.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got to say, Ed hit the nail on the head. And again, we tip our caps to all of you guys. But before we went into this, and Joe, thank you for bringing that up. You're a gentleman. We broke bread together. We got out and had some nice dinner with Diane. She was poking me in like a good old Italian, and all night long it was exhausting. Here's some of the questions. Will there be a separate trial? Gayla Dennison sends in. It's possible they'll request it. Maybe, I don't know.
You have to have grounds to separate, and it would depend on statements. That's the most common issue, a brutal issue where understand that everyone has a right to remain silent if you're a criminal defendant. So you can't be forced to take the stand. But we also have something called the confrontation clause, which allows us to confront our accusers. So if they have some recorded statement made by a co-defendant about me, and I'm not going to be able to question her about it because she's not taking the stand, then I can move for a severance, because that would be overly prejudicial to me if they're introducing, let's just say, her statement and she's implicating me. I can't cross-examine her. So There's got to be grounds in order to get a severance on the trial. And it's got to be significant grounds, because a case like this where it's the same witnesses, it's really, I imagine it logically follows that the same witnesses are going to be testifying. It's called judicial economy. It doesn't make sense to separate these people unless there's some overly prejudicial effect on one of the defendants, because ultimately it's the fair trial of each individual that we want to ensure.
And then they can separate on their own. They can say, I'm going to roll on him, or he's going to roll on her, point fingers at each other. And then the DA will work that out. Anyhow, there's a question here, Ron, if I may. I keep seeing it pop up about if they find the bodies, can they tell? I mean, it goes back to the same thing we had with Brian Laundrie. It's been quite some time now, longer than Brian Laundrie, that these bodies have been out there wherever they are. I'd be surprised if they weren't all fully skeletonized yet. And so in terms of blunt force trauma type injuries and things of that nature, you won't have any soft tissue or muscle to determine those facts, but you may have broken bones, you may have broken ribs, and things of that nature that would be indicative of types of blunt force trauma injuries, and whether it was a fist or an actual blunt force trauma instrument like a bat or some kind of tool that was used. And then again, we'll fall back on the expertise of the forensic anthropologists to look at the bones and see what we can make, and also go with the ID, the odontologist. You get the dentist in to look at any dental records there, pull DNA from the bones and the teeth, and match them up. So
and Ed and I will tell you if that in fact happens and there is a recovery, and I pray that there's a recovery so they can give a proper burial for these two boys. If that does happen, we will have Dr. Murray Marks and the full team that that Ed has assembled, that he has his Rolodex ready to go, and we will have those professionals come in and talk about this.
You're giving away your age when you say Rolodex.
Well, yeah, we're up there, Ed. We're getting up there.
Yes, I know.
I just want to say quickly a happy belated birthday to Ed Wallace. He turned 29 yesterday, on the day that Trezell and Jacqueline, unfortunately, were taken into custody. So we will not forget that next year. March 1st, Ed Wallace turns 29. Well, next year will be 30. So
It was the 40th anniversary of my 29th birthday.
oh, he just gave up the shop. Lieutenant Pete Pranzo sends in, happy birthday, brother. Many more.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy birthday.
birthday.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Pete Pranzo sends in a super chat. Before that, Robin asked, is this a death penalty case? Dustin, I know you can chime in. State of California, since 2019, good old Newsom put a just squashed the death penalty charges. Nobody could be charged, I think, in the state. Last execution was 2006, if my memory serves me correct. So
Right.
that'll be a big no.
Yeah, we'll find out tomorrow. Usually at arraignment, if they're going to be seeking life, you usually can tell by how many attorneys they assign, because they'll usually have two attorneys. If someone's facing a life, they'll have two attorneys for someone that's going to do the appeal. So they got to be present during the entire trial and every step.
There you go. Joe, you want to take that for the LT? Because if you don't, he'll write you up.
What do you mean? The death penalty issue?
No, Lieutenant Pete Pranzo. I had it on the screen. Maybe you can't see it. He said, Joe,
would be defense be entitled to cross-examine the young children? Yeah, sadly, that's the confrontation clause. You have a right to cross-examine and your accusers. So they would be entitled. So that's what I'm saying. Like, please have some compassion for these kids. Sometimes prosecutors, they just charge the max, and there is no reason for a defendant to plead guilty because they're getting the max. So this is a case where maybe we might want to try to do something here to avoid that trial, because usually when you're facing, the max, I don't know if this is a death penalty case or not, but even life without parole, why would I plead to that and agree to that? Why not take a shot and go to trial? That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes prosecutors leave defense attorneys no choice. A defendant has nothing to lose. It can't be worse. They're already hitting them with the maximum sentence. So maybe come off that and avoid this trial.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that. Ed, as you can see, there's a whole colossal happy birthdays to you, birthday boy.
Thank you, everyone, for your kind wishes.
Yeah. And I feel horrible that I missed it, but this guy was in Bora Bora having the time of his life. So yeah. I was like,
oh, hell no.
my birthday dinner consisted of airplane food.
Oh, geez. All right, listen. So, folks, let's keep our eye on the prize, and the prize is a successful prosecution. If it goes to trial, a guilty verdict. That's what we look for here. We need to keep evil behind bars in the cage where they belong. We need to respect the biological family. Ryan Dean and the father is actually two fathers with these boys. But Ryan Dean and the two dads, they need our strength, our prayers, our support. Putting everything aside of how this all went down, we have a loss of life ×2, and it is traumatic. It is devastating. Look at Roro. Look at Jennifer Nobles, Keisha Day, all of the folks in Bakersfield. They have this is very emotional for them. So right now, we need to get around them and support them. Let's take a peek at what happens tomorrow. Ed, myself, Joe, and Dustin will be watching closely, and we will be covering this from right now going forward to the end. But we have been on this case for 14 months, and we're not going to be going anywhere. So if you have questions, send them over to DutyRon.com. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. Hit the thumbs up. Follow me on all things social media. One word, DutyRon, and that is on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now TikTok. Me and Ed, even though he doesn't like it, we have made it to TikTok. We're not TikTok famous, but we're on there. And the only thing that we're doing is uploading little shorts of our videos, educational videos on there. So make sure you go over and subscribe on TikTok. Again, as this thing develops, as this case evolves, there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There'll be a lot of questions. There'll be a lot of misinformation put out there in the Twitter sphere, Facebook, YouTube. Be careful of the streets you walk down, because you can really get sucked into this. If you want valid information, here, Joe Murray, if he ever goes live again on allegedly guilty, police off the cuff. I'm going to link all those channels down below. These are valid people to go to for credible information. I love Mike King, Profiling Evil. You can go over there and see valid information in regards to this case. So again, I want to say thank you to Dustin. Thank you to Joe Murray for spending an hour and 45 with us here tonight. Ed, any final words for the show?
Yeah, great show. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, our audience, for participating and your great questions. So sad, the outcome. Wasn't what we were hoping for, but at least we have a direction now. And God willing, now maybe these parents will do the right thing and give up the location so we can give these children a proper burial.
Yes. And Dustin, final words for the people out there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the like I said earlier, survivors, everyone left. You know, now and Ed said it. We have direction now, so now it's changing direction. I will say this: you know, the prosecutor that they spoke of, Eric Smith, top notch. Brian Estep, top notch. So the community can take solace in that, knowing there's going to be a good, thorough prosecution of this case, and that we can all get justice for these two boys.
Justice for our boys. Joe, anything?
Yeah, I just want to shout out to law enforcement, the district attorney putting this case together. It's such a difficult job, especially a no-body homicide. It's so hard to do, but I give them credit for doing it. But again, let's trust but verify. I want to see the evidence. I want to see it play out if we have that opportunity. If there's no plea, I want to see how these statements came about. I want to, just verify. That's our job. We want to make sure the government is not overstepping and they followed the proper protocol. But I am happy so far at what happened.
Yeah, and let me add on to that. And we want to make sure that the government puts these pieces of shit in jail and lock them down for the rest of their lives. But I get what you're saying, Joe. I respect it. I love you. And I thank you for being here. So I'm going to go full screen with my final thoughts. I want to just say this. Let's be, again, respectful to all of the people who are involved, that are boots on the ground, the family, the law enforcement, the investigators. They need our support. Let's get behind all of our local law enforcement across the country, across this great land, across the world. I want to just say prayers for the people of Ukraine, our forces in our coalition, not just the United States forces, but the forces across the world that are down giving support. I want to just pray for them and pray for all of the people inside of Ukraine in the affected zone. And again, God bless the world. God bless the United States of America. God bless each and every one of us here in the chat, but especially all the victims of crime and their families. Cincere and classic, Orrin and Orson West, they are on our minds, and let's keep them right here close to our hearts. Guys, love and respect on behalf of Ed Wallace, Crime Time with DutyRon, Dustin, Joe, thank you for joining, guys. Good night.
Stay safe.